There are lots of Mario Kart tracks in the franchise. Some are pretty easy and some are very difficult indeed. So today I'm going to be focusing on the tougher side of Mario Kart, and I'm going to be ranking the top 20 hardest Mario Kart tracks. So these tracks will be based off how hard they are, how difficult it is to master, and how difficult it is to drive around it without avoiding any of the hazards. This has nothing to do with how much I like the tracks, this is just to do with how hard they are. So let's get going. First up is the best track in Mario Kart Double Dash. GCN Bowser's Castle is a fairly difficult track. This track is pretty dark, and it's quite hard to actually see the track and to see upcoming obstacles in the track because everything blends in really well. So that's the main reason why this track is on the list of the top 20 hardest Mario Kart tracks. The track also requires you to take a lot of really tight turns as well. But for this track, as good as it is, if you are really careful, it's not really that hard. I'm talking the original DS version, not the Mario Kart 8 remake. This track is alright, but there is a bit on the swinging clock and a lot of pendulums which can be pretty hard to avoid. This track isn't too bad, which is why it's so low down, but it can be a bit annoying. While I love this track so much, I cannot deny that I actually find this track pretty tricky. I don't really know why I find this track so hard because it doesn't really look that hard, but when I was first playing Mario Kart 8 and I was just starting to get to know all the tracks, I did find this track to be pretty hard actually. And I think it's because of the tight turns and the anti-gravity section where there's a lack of an off-road, and I don't think the original GBA version is as hard as the remake due to the more slippery controls of Mario Kart Super Circuit, which makes the tight controls easy to deal with, and also the fact that Mario Kart Super Circuit has an off-road as well. But there are shortcuts which makes the tracks not the hardest in the franchise, which is why it's really low down. Mario Kart 8 is pretty easy because Nintendo widened the track a lot and all of the turns are really easy, but the original SNES version, my word, it's so much harder. For starters, this track has a broken bridge, which you must jump over or else you'll fall into the water. And the turns are so much tighter. But if you master the actual drifting and you are careful around the bends, then this track isn't actually too bad. But on your first go, it's really hard. But with practice, it's not too bad. This track has a lot of jumps and pretty narrow paths to go through. And the thwomps are pretty annoying to avoid. They always seem to hit you. This track isn't necessarily bad if you're careful, but if a thwomp hits you, or if you fall into the lava, which is pretty easy to do, or if your kart bashes into a wall in the split section, then yeah, you will struggle a lot on this track. Now, there are two main reasons why I think that this track is hard. For starters, you cannot see your position throughout the race, so you have absolutely no idea whether you're doing good or whether you're doing bad. And that alone will give you a sense of anxiety, which can affect your racing. Also, if you fall off in this track, you will fall all the way down to the bottom of the track before Lucky Tube picks you up, and it's a very long fall. The original SNES version isn't too bad, but the remake I find a lot harder. Mainly because of the massive mud patch in the middle of the track. In the original Super Mario Kart track, if you drive in the off-road section, you don't lose as much speed as you do in Mario Kart DS. But in the retro version, if you're driving in the mud which is classified as off-road, you will drive a lot slower and the steering will become a lot more tighter. So this makes the remake a lot more annoying and a lot more difficult than the original. But regardless, I really don't like SNES Choco Island 2 and it's one of the worst tracks in the franchise. Those cars are on a mission. Their sole purpose is just to flatten you. And also the music is pretty fast paced. And I don't know if this is me, but I actually think that the music makes the cars feel a lot faster than usual. So it's really easy to bump into these cars on the road. You also run the risk of running into a bomb car, which can really ruin your race. I mean, why on earth are the bomb cars on the road anyway? Wouldn't that make the road really dangerous? Man, I hate to be a driver on Moonview Highway. I could run the risk of bashing into a bomb car and then you will pretty much explode into pieces. However, if you do stick to the left-hand lane on this track where all the traffic is driving away from you, then this track isn't actually so bad. But regardless, it still is quite challenging. The best Bowser's Castle track in the franchise. Not only is it the best Bowser's Castle in the franchise, but it's also the 12th hardest track in the entire Mario Kart franchise and the hardest Bowser's Castle in the franchise, so there won't be any more Bowser's Castle after this one. There are 3 hard bits in this track. The first one is where there's a stone Bowser statue spitting massive fireballs at you. The second one where you have to jump over a massive 3-pronged fire bar. And the third hardest bit is at the end where you have to dodge a lot of lava spouts. This track is hard, the hardest Bowser's Castle in the franchise, but like I said, it's only the 12th hardest in the Mario Kart franchise. This track is really hard because the lanes are even narrower than they are on Moonview Highway, so it's even harder to dodge these cars. And also, my word, in mirror mode. Mirror mode, the cars change direction and you're now driving towards the traffic, which makes it even harder. Now, the Mario Kart 8 remake widened the track a lot and ruined mirror mode, which makes the track a lot easier. But the original N64 version, now that's pretty tough. During the second lap of this track, earthquakes begin to happen on this track, which is pretty scary. And in the third lap, the track becomes even narrower than it was in the first and second lap. Well, I do think that the original version is ever so slightly harder than the Mario Kart 8 remake, but still, it's a pretty tough track on both versions. This track isn't actually so bad, but the reason why it's number 9 is because there's just this one turn, this one particular turn in this track, that if you overturn it on that corner, there is a ramp that will lead you to an earlier part of the track. So one bad turn on that bend and you'll go from 1st to 8th just like that. Now if you're really careful, you will avoid that ramp and then that track isn't actually that bad. But if you make a mistake and do that turn really badly, then you pretty much have to restart the track because you will be in last place, so you'll have a lot of catching up to do. But that one turn is the only reason why GBA Lakeside Park is on this list. Otherwise, it would not be on this list. N64 Sherbet Land. Now, I don't think many of you were surprised to see this track on this list. So, what do we have here? Annoying ice physics, which cause your kart to skid all over the place? How about some annoying penguins that like to slide and bash into your kart without a second thought? And if that's not enough, how about the risk of you falling into freezing cold waters? This track is so unforgiving and requires nearly perfect driving to win this race. Thankfully, the Mario Kart Wii remake is ever so slightly easier, but still, this track is very hard. I know what you're thinking, how on earth is 3DS Cooper City at number 7? I mean, do I really think it's harder than N64 Sherbet Land? Yeah, this track may not look so bad, but trust me, this track is quite deceiving. This track has a lot of twists and turns in it, and it's also raining, so your kart is pretty slippery, and there's a lack of guardrails in some of the track, so it's quite easy to fall off. And there's this one turn, a bit like GBA Lakeside Park, there is one turn that for some reason always takes me out. I hardly ever complete that turn. I always fall off in that one particular turn. I can just never make it, especially when I'm playing in 150 and 200cc. So this track is really hard and you need to be really good at drifting to be good at this track. I think that's probably the only reason why I find this track hard, because I'm really bad at drifting, so I can never really make the turns very well. But if you're really good at drifting, then to be fair, 3DS Cooper City isn't actually that hard at all. Here's the first Rainbow Road on this list. I only took it to number 6, and believe me, it will not be the last. The Wii's Rainbow Road was the first ever Rainbow Road that I played, and believe me, it took me such a long time for me to master this track. There are hardly any guardrails on this track, so it's so easy to fall off. But if you have mastered this track, then it actually isn't so bad, but it does take quite a bit of practice to beat this track. It's pretty similar to the Wii's Rainbow Road in terms of difficulty, but I do think it is slightly harder for two reasons. First up, this track has a lot of boost panels, which requires you to go really fast, and so it's really easy to fall off the track whilst going at these speeds. And also, in Mario Kart Double Dash, drifting and turning around tight corners is pretty hard. So this track is very tricky if you don't really know what you're doing or you're not really experienced with Mario Kart Double Dash. But again, just like the Wii's Rainbow Road, it does take a bit of practice to beat the track, and once you've mastered it, it's not that bad. My all-time favourite track, allegedly, because apparently it's Airship Fortress now, is the 4th hardest track in the franchise. Well, yes, as much as I do love this track, and I can go on and on and on about how much I love this track, this list isn't about how much I love tracks, this list is about how much I find them hard. So, this track is so stressful. There are no guardrails on this track whatsoever, and they are 90-degree turns. And also the thwomps, oh no, they're not any old thwomps, oh no. They are super thwomps that can spin you out just by touching them. They don't even need to squash you, they just need to touch you, and then yeah, it's pretty much game over. This track is insane, and it wants you to suffer, it wants you to feel pain on this track. Yes, this track is so amazing, but boy, it's so hard, and it knows it. I actually think GBA Rainbow Road is even harder. And yes, I think GBA Rainbow Road is the hardest Rainbow Road in the franchise. So number 2 and number 1 will not be Rainbow Roads. This track has no guardrails at all, just like SNES Rainbow Road. But this track is harder because of the jumps. If you go onto one of the jumps, your kart will fly really high in the air. And because gliding jumps wasn't really a thing in Mario Kart Super Circuit, if you go onto these jumps, your kart will fall down pretty fast. And so it's so easy to completely miss the landing and fall into the abyss below due to the lack of gliding jumps in this game. And these jumps are everywhere. So that's the main reason why I think GBA Rainbow Road is harder than SNES Rainbow Road. Yes, these jumps can be really useful for shortcuts, but I only ever recommend you use these jumps if you really know what you're doing, or you're pretty much a master in Mario Kart Super Circuit. Or else you will miss the landing and fall right down into the abyss. If you're inexperienced in this game, which I am, then trust me, avoid these jumps at all costs if you can, because like I said, they are literally everywhere on this track. This Rainbow Road is difficult, and just like the SNES Rainbow Road, it wants you to suffer, it wants you to feel pain, and it knows that it's hard and it's proud of it. You need an awful lot of practice to really master this track, and I mean a lot of practice. You need to play this track like there's no tomorrow for you to purely master this track. This may be the hardest Rainbow Road in the franchise, but like I said, it isn't the hardest Mario Kart track in the franchise. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. How can there be 2 Mario Kart tracks that are harder than the Rainbow Roads? Well, let us see. Wii's Wario Gold Mine is one of the 2 tracks that are harder than the Rainbow Roads. And I'm just talking about the original Wii version, not the Mario Kart 8 remake. The Mario Kart 8 remake is pretty easy, but the Wii's version, wow, this is hard. This track doesn't have many guardrails either, just like a Rainbow Road. In fact, it's pretty much Rainbow Road if Rainbow Road was made out of wood. I kind of want to call this track Wooden Rainbow Road because it's kind of what it is. And also, due to camera angles in some parts of the track, it's pretty hard to see where you're going. And also, how can I not mention Wii's Wario Gold Mine without mentioning the infamous minecart section? Yeah. This track is really hard. And yeah, I mastered Rainbow Road before I mastered this track. Yes, you heard me right. I mastered the Rainbow Road for Mario Kart Wii before I mastered Wii's Wario Gold Mine. That is how hard it is. I'm not joking or exaggerating. I generally found Rainbow Road easier than Wario's Gold Mine. That is how hard I find Wii's Wario's Gold Mine. But it's number 2. This means there's one track that I find harder than any other Mario Kart track ever. I wonder what it's going to be. Well, Let's find out. SNES Vanilla Lake 2 is the hardest Mario Kart track in the franchise. I do kind of like this track, and I do think that it's underrated, and it's definitely the better Vanilla Lakes in the Vanilla Lake series. But boy, it's so hard. How can SNES Vanilla Lake 2 be the hardest track in the franchise, you might ask? Okay, well, for starters, we have some ice physics, which already is bad enough, but aided with Super Mario Kart's bad controls, it's a nightmare to control your car because it just goes all over the place and your kart will just go everywhere but where you want it to go. Okay, not so bad if it weren't for those ice blocks that will put your kart to a complete stop if you touch them, and they are in really tight bunches, so it's really hard to avoid them. Okay, still not super bad. Oh wait, there is the water. The entire track is surrounded by water. In fact, Vanilla Lake 2 is pretty much a 70% water. And if you fall into it, which is insanely easy to do, almost too easy to do, you might as well start over. Because not only does Lucky Tree have to save you, which takes a long time in this game, but you also need to wait for your kart to unfreeze. There is one more that pretty much cements this track to being the hardest track in the franchise. And that is the actual road of this track, which is ice, might I mention, so it's so easy to slip and fall. The actual track is really narrow, so it's really easy to either drive into the snow, which acts as the off-road, or even worse, the freezing cold water. Ice physics, bad controls, ice blocks, water, really narrow tracks, and a really slow off-road. That's 6 points that pretty much cements SNES Vanilla Lake 2 from being the hardest track in the franchise. If this track had any other points that made it hard, it generally would be impossible. And I'm not even joking when I'm saying this. This track is so tough. It's so slippy. It wants you to suffer. It wants you to feel pain. It does not want you to enjoy this track. It does not want you to think it's just an easy, nice, breeze, relaxing track. Boy, no. It wants you to suffer. And it will take great pleasure in your suffering from this track. It's so hard. It knows it's hard. It's proud of it. It wants to be labelled as the hardest track in the franchise. And it does its job so well. I may kind of like you, SNES Vanilla Lake 2, but boy, you are so tough. You are so slippery. You are so unforgiving. You are the hardest track ever. Even the most experienced Mario Kart players will struggle a lot with this track. Yes, SNES Vanilla Lake 2, I shall say it again, Vanilla Lake 2 is definitely, without a doubt, the hardest track in the Mario Kart franchise. Well, there we have it. The top 20 hardest tracks in the Mario Kart franchise. So yeah, thank you all for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I shall see you all next week for another video. Goodbye.